Hay que analizar, en este caso con todo un experto en el sector como Raphael Thuin, Head of Capital Market Strategies at Tikehau Capital. Raphael, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, good to be here.
Trump's tariffs are already a reality. Would you say that the consequences could be dramatic?
They could be pretty significant indeed. And the key question, obviously, is how much of it is going to be implemented. What is President Trump's ultimate goal here? Some people are saying it's just negotiation tactics. Some other people are talking about a deep conviction for President Trump, something he was mentioning in 1980s interviews, for instance, on TV, how China is not competing fairly, how tariffs are a beautiful concept, and his deep conviction that the US is going to get richer through tariffs. So we don't exactly know what's going to be implemented, but if his threats are coming to reality, if really we have blanketed tariffs across Europe, China, Canada, etc., then the impact on earnings and on inflation should be very significant.
What response do you expect from China in particular?
So China is really at the heart of his economic policy. Once again, it's a deep and old conviction of his. There is a massive trade deficit between China and the US. Currently, it's at 360 billion. And just to keep things in perspective, this trade deficit between China and the US has grown threefold, 3 times, between 2018 and now. So we can really see the trend is accelerating. This is clearly a matter for concern for President Trump. And on top of being unsustainable, President Trump feels that China is not competing fairly, that by subsidizing industries, by flooding the market with products, there is an uneven playing field and that US companies cannot compete. And finally, there is a national security issue. Chips, data, social media are for the administration in the US a real threat. So we can expect tariffs to happen for China. You have a lot of conversation. Currently, if you take the average tariffs applied on China, we're talking about 20%. If you add 10, 30, 40% more, the impact could be significant. Some people are talking more than 1% on GDP growth for China. So this is clearly going to be the main focus for President Trump. And interestingly, too, this is ready. When you look back at Trump 1.0, his first administration, there was a phase 1 trade agreement where China was supposed to start buying American to avoid getting additional tariffs. And the reality is they never did so. They never followed through. So it would be easy for President Trump to pick it up from here, just apply the trade 1 phase agreement from 2018 and see what comes next coming from China. So clearly this is going to be very topical for the market in the coming weeks.
And what do you think, Raphael, about the EU's position? What impact do you think these tariffs on steel and aluminum could have?
So obviously the trade deficit between the US and Europe is also very large in Europe's favor, meaning that Europe is exporting more to the US than importing. And obviously tariffs will be impactful, especially for some industries. Everybody is thinking about autos, everybody is thinking about luxury, consumer discretionary, and clearly this would be impactful for Europe. So when you look at the average revenue generated with the US in Europe, we're talking about 26%. So, Europe is very dependent on the US, it's trading a lot and exporting a lot to the US. The question is, out of those 26%, how much will be really impacted by potential tariffs? And this is where it gets a bit more complicated. Because if you remove services, which are not impacted by tariffs, if you remove all the goods which are produced locally in the US, and we've seen a lot of European companies more recently building factories in the US to make sure that they were producing locally to avoid tariffs. If you remove potential exemptions, if you remove companies such as Airbus, for instance, with a very strong pricing power, then at the end of the day, maybe tariffs will be manageable for Europe. Some people are talking about 2, 3, 4% of revenues impacted only. So obviously nothing insignificant. This is for real, and this will impact earnings growth in Europe. But maybe something which is manageable on the one hand, and maybe also something which is to some extent incorporated in prices already. So that's to be seen.
Okay, Raphael Thuin, Head of Capital Markets Strategies of Tikehau Capital. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bien, muy importante las consecuencias de Donald Trump, en este caso, de nuevo, demostrando que va muy en serio y que puede